Rukus Avenue Radio.
Hello, I'm Anoushkha Shankar, and you're listening to Rukus Avenue Radio.
Namaste and hello, Rukus Avenue Radio listeners. This is your correspondent, Priyadarshini G. Roy. We are live today via Zoom with the musical extraordinaire, Anoushkha Shankar. Anoushka, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
So, without further ado, I'd like to straight get into it. Anoushka is making her Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra debut this weekend, Saturday, May 20th at the Alex Theater in Glendale, California, and Sunday, May 21st at UCLA's Royce Hall in Westwood, California. The concerts will be conducted by Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra music director Jaime Martin. So, before we get right into your bio, Anoushka, how are you today and how are you feeling about your performance coming up?
I'm very, very happy and excited to be back in Los Angeles and to be performing back here again. And I love playing this concerto, so I'm looking forward to performing it. And as you say, I'll be with specifically the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra for the first time, so I'm looking forward to that.
Wonderful. All right, diving into your bio. Anoushkha Shankar's list of accomplishments reads as many life stories in one. Masterful sitarist, film composer, impassioned activist, the youngest and first female recipient of a British House of Commons Shield, the first Indian musician to perform live or to serve as a presenter at the Grammy Awards with 7 nominations under her belt. So 8.
9 now, actually.
9 now. 9 now. We need to update that. But so she is the presenter and the nominee of 9 Grammy Awards under her belt and the first Indian woman to be nominated. One of the first 5 female composers to have been added onto the UK A-level music syllabus. Immersed from a young age on the world stage with over a quarter centuries performing behind her. She's a singular, genre-defying artist across realms, classical and contemporary, acoustic, and electronic. Anoushka, it is our honor to have you on my show today with Rukus Avenue Radio.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
All right, so just diving right in, since you are a master of different genres, how essential is it for people to listen to classical music as well as mainstream popular music?
I wouldn't say I'm a master of multiple genres in any way, but I'm certainly a lover of multiple genres, and I think a huge part of what's given me the ability to make the kind of music I make and have the career I make was and is, continuing to grow up and live with a very open ear and an open mind. So I think my exposure from a young age to multiple genre, different cultures, different styles, all of that just opened and broadened my palette, opened my creativity. And also just as a listener is deeply fulfilling because there's so much that's out there in the world. So I think, ultimately everyone finds their groove and finds what they like and love. And I don't think there's any pressure to have to listen to other things, but I think curiosity and exposure, I think that's really important. So if you're in a position to either parent or be around young people, for example, to help create that exposure for them so that they grow up with all types of music and art feeling normal, then at least they get to make a choice. If some of it feels inaccessible or intimidating or foreign, then they will never have the opportunity to choose that the same way.
Right. I think that's very insightful. If it was not for our parents kind of educating us about maybe the classic olden songs, classical music or ghazals, we may not have learned to appreciate that type of music today. And you see that transcend into like different remixes or adopting it into our own way. But how do you think music impacts everyone's daily lives?
I mean, it's self-evident, isn't it? Like the way that we all use music in such personal ways. I mean, it's like it can be a backdrop, it can be an outlet, it can be an expression. But I think people use that in different ways, but it has the ability to articulate or help us process things maybe in a more ephemeral or subtle way than other things that we do, whether that's speaking or writing. Like there's a direct quality to that, but making or listening to music is more intangible and more emotional, perhaps. And so it has a quality to it that other things don't.
Right. I also read that you kind of connect music with meditation or a form of meditation. And so how do you think music can be used in terms of meditating and calming the mind? And yes, we have different iterations of emotions that we experience, so different genres of music. But how do you feel like classical or contemporary music can be meditative?
I think all forms of music, well, maybe barring a couple, but most forms of music can be meditative.
Right.
I think the act of playing music can be meditative. I think that the act of a practice and of showing up and of going into that kind of state of being truly deeply present, or in a flow, that is a meditative state. And so that was a huge, learning experience for me in my life. And I'm really glad, like, music helped me recognize that in other things. But I think, music can help us. I think a yoga teacher decades ago said to me, like, breath, body, and music, like, those are the things that can help you snap into a meditative state. So I don't know how and why, I just know it does.
I really relate to the point that you made, that playing instruments is more meditative than actually listening to it. And I think that's a gift in itself. I play the harmonium and the piano, not as well, but for my musical purposes. And I always found sometimes when I'm not singing and just playing it, I go into a trance and I can really focus. And I think that is also a transgression that happens from a childhood. Like, maybe you can kind of attain to that, is when you're learning how to play an instrument, it could be more technical and it could be more strenuous, of like learning the technicalities of, musical lessons and like learning to be perfect or trying to get something right, to learning to let go and to have it free flowing and, that transportation property that instrument has. So how did you make that transportation from learning the technicalities to being a meditative state?
Well, I think that meditative quality can exist at many, many levels. People can play without being virtuosos and can have that experience. And I do think as a listener, you can have an equivalent experience as well. I don't think it's necessarily more for the instrumentalist or the musician. But I think for me, that practice or that path or that perfecting, that becomes in service of the connection. And so I think, I know what you're talking about, that like earlier on, they used to feel kind of separate from me. And as a teenager or even in my early 20s, it was like, I thought of it as like, now I'm being really technical and how do I become more emotional, or how, and slowly, like over the years, that gap between the two has lessened. And it feels like, the more in shape I am, the more able I am, the more free my hands are, the more my hands can go wherever my mind wants to take them. And whatever the flow is, whatever I feel, I can trust my hands to do it, So being at a high level of skill actually means that I can flow better. So, and I think it's the same. I mean, yoga, again, is a great parallel with that. You're practicing yoga, whether it's your first day or whether you've been doing it 30 years. It's just that at different levels of body ability, you're able to challenge yourself in different ways and keep yourself in the present moment. As soon as something becomes easy, it starts to become boring or your mind starts to wander. So that's the only reason you have to keep challenging yourself. So I think it's the same. It's an evolution or a growth process as an instrumentalist or a musician as well, to keep extending in some way. And weirdly, ironically, over the years, I also find at the same time that I'm more and more willing to let go of that and be really simple too. So I don't know. I think it's a combination of all.
It's a non-linear process. But yes, I remember one time Leonardo DiCaprio, when he gave advice to actors or aspiring actors, he said everyone wants to just dive in and get into the character, but he said you can't get into that character without knowing your line. So it goes back to how you want to express 100%. That line, or how your character would want to express that line, whether it's I'm fine. There's 1,001 ways to say that one dialogue. But if you don't know that dialogue, you're not able to free yourself and to get into character.
Yes.
So
and you have to know it, but you have to know it so well that you're not thinking about it anymore. Because if you're thinking about it, you're thinking about what word comes after the next and how much of a pause to give or what. Whereas as soon as it's so under your skin that you know it well enough that you can stop thinking about it, that's when you can think and feel your way into the character. And it's the same. And I think, I've had only a few sitar students that I've started taking on in recent years. And like, they come to me because they love the music I make. But when they start learning with me, I teach them the way I was taught, which is from the beginning. I'm not teaching them from the beginning to kind of make music that exists in multiple genres. I'm teaching you one genre first. I'm teaching you this music, and then you know that well enough, you can do with that what you
exactly
what you want.
Yes. I think it goes back to even when I was learning, I started off with Rabindra Sangeet, which is the songs by Rabindranath Tagore, and that was my classical base and semi-classical. And I was like, I want to do film songs. I want to learn that popular song that I hear on TV. And then my guru said, no, if you don't know the basics, you have to learn how to crawl before you can start standing up to walk and even run. So it goes back to paying respect and paying your dues and actually learning the art form and taking time to learn the craft. But now fast forward into all your amazing accomplishments and achievements and tribute to music. As a recipient of the British House of Commons Shield, the first Indian woman to be nominated for 9 Grammy Award nominations, among other prestigious awards, how do awards impact you?
I mean, that's a pretty subjective question because it depends which way we're thinking about it. They certainly have a kind of material impact because especially certain prestigious ones or well-known ones, they go in your bio and people go, wow, so that has a commercial impact because people recognize that and they think that means something, It can also feel good on an ego sense or on a validation sense, being awarded or being told you're nominated. There's something about that feels recognized or loved, and that feels great. But I think it's really important, to remember where that sits in the grand scheme of reality. And I think being nominated for Grammys is a great example of that because I've got 9 nominations, and on one side, that's incredibly impressive. But on the other side, each single time when you go up there to the awards and then you're not the one that wins, that same nomination that's impressive is also a loss at the same time. So which thing is true? Is it a loss or is it a win?
Right.
Both those things. And ultimately, the piece of music that you made that was nominated remains completely unchanged by all of those things. So
absolutely.
Yeah, having a sense of perspective, I think, is important.
Right. That's why I wanted the subjective answer, because I think some people, there's 2 sides to every coin. While those things are great, how meaningful are they, or how much impact do they have on our personal lives or our view of ourselves as an artist? So I wanted to gain kind of your perspective on it. And I think that you've stated it beautifully. It does and it doesn't at the same time. So now, what suggestions do you have for musicians trying to break into the business? Because I feel like a lot of people are dominated by the social media analytics or these numbers or awards or, external validation at the end of the day. So what is your perspective on that?
I mean, I think it's tricky because on one level, things are obviously so different now than when I started. And you said it right, like the right kind of social media moment can create a career nowadays, and but the odds are with all the noise that's on the internet, that you would be the one that would go viral. Like it's very hard to have control over that and so it's a tough one to chase, and also then that starts changing the type of work you're making or how you're making it if you start thinking about what's going to have that kind of impact. So, I think to try one's best to have a balance of an understanding of music as a business, because it is a music business. So yes, how are you marketing yourself, or who's taking care of you? Are you safe? Are you being taken advantage of? What are all of those things? It's important to know. And on the other side, to have some other side of you that you protect completely from all of that, which is about making the art that you make and going, I am not altering my inner truth in order to try and, and somewhere in there's a really tricky balance that obviously gets easier and easier to try to achieve if you have some freedom that comes from success. And at the beginning, that can be very, very hard.
I can only imagine, because when I see a lot of teenagers specifically who don't have a sense of direction of who they are, because obviously they're young. They're figuring it out, as many people have taken decades to figure out who they are and what they want, and especially in the entertainment industry or business. So kind of combining the right and the left side of the brain, whether that's the creative and the business analytical aspects of it, is no one-step formula, but a very subjective experience, like you mentioned. But I see a lot of the times people are running towards becoming Insta famous or famous on, TikTok, for example, based on a trend, instead of staying authentic to what their true art form and what they're delivering that's different, that will automatically make them stand out from the crowd. So what do you suggest for instrumentalists or other musicians to kind of break away from the noise on the internet?
Again, I think that's a hard question to answer in a generic way, depending on instrument, depending on genre. But you've already said it beautifully. I think each one of us as an artist has something that's unique in ourselves, which is our own voice. And that voice is kind of probably aching to express itself through your instrument in some way or another, to really protect that and to honor that and allow that out, then at the very least, you are automatically doing something that no one else is doing, and therefore it has value. And whether it finds its listenership easily or not, or whether that is a small niche listenership, or whether it's a massive mainstream pop listenership,
right.
I don't know.
It's a lot of market analysis to, take into consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah. Understanding target audience. Like, we get into the whole business aspect of it, as, many people in the business will ask you these questions. And a lot of the times, even as a teenager, I'd be like, what are they talking about?
I don't know.
All overwhelming.
Yeah. And I think and that's what's tricky is like, as being in music and more, the way the world is now, it's like, as a musician, you are kind of needed and expected to be your own publicist, your own manager, your own marketer, your own, and I don't see how that's in any way connected to making art. Like, I've never understood why my brain is expected to work in both those ways, you know? And it's tough.
I can attest to that as well. It's advocating for yourself, but all of these people who you see as celebrities who have, quote unquote, made it, they have a whole team of individuals who are experts in each of those things, whether that is in communication, PR, assisting, managing, et cetera, et cetera. But in the initial phases, you are expected to be the, jack of all trades and maybe master of only one, which is your music or your art form, and learning through that mastery, and not just, thinking that supersedes everything, but taking the other aspects into consideration as well. So it is a different market that everyone is kind of learning and navigating, with streaming being such a huge new dimension to it. So now that we have like streaming music and streaming concerts, what do you look forward to and love about live performances versus the studio or something that's remote, for example?
So I love studio work in one way. I do. And I love live music in another way. So it's not that I don't love studio work, but I think the pandemic experience is a great, example of what it felt like when live music was taken away for a long time. And I was aware of it as a performer. There was like a part of me that felt a little bit cut off, a little bit lonely, because I was kind of reaching people through a screen. And it was also this, on one side, it was curious and interesting to do it a different way, like putting together film videos with musicians. And there was something kind of creative about learning a new way of doing it. But I actually could describe more as a listener than as a music maker, that like some months later, when I was at someone else's concert for the first time, and it was like my first live experience was being in the audience for something, and she was playing music very far away from me, and her whole band were playing music. And like halfway through the show, I became really, really aware that like my body was listening to the music too. Like your cells are all experiencing sound waves moving through them. And I suddenly realized, like, a massive realization that for all these months, I've only been hearing through like headphones in my ears. And so it's not been a whole body experience. It's not been a full experience the same way. And so I was in a room with the music, and I was like, my cells missed this,
Yes.
And it was the same as a performer, to kind of be in the room with other musicians and to have chemistry and to have reactions to each other and to have flow and to have some danger, that it wasn't all going to be chopped and edited and perfected, and that things might happen, but that's the electricity of all of it, that's irreplaceable.
Right. I think you're talking about the human experience of the unknown. So when you do like a virtual studio session or a virtual concert or anything, you know that if you mess up or if there's some type of technical difficulty, someone will be there to catch you if you fall. And I think the beauty of live performances is obviously audience reactions and that engagement and that connection that you share. But you talked about the musical camaraderie that you have with your fellow performers and realizing that, okay, anything can happen at the split second. But the excitement of knowing that and putting that into your music creates a different level of a performance, which is very unique to any other.
It's back to what we were saying earlier. It's being completely present. You have to be, you can't tune out, you just got to be all there.
It's hard in today's day to be completely, a kind of like a sponge and just being absorbing the energy around us, because I feel like we're all at that level post-pandemic mentally speaking, that our glasses are kind of full and we're trying not to tip over, but still allow ourselves, the grace of still trying to absorb and be present in the moment without kind of the thoughts of like future worry or like, where is music going to go? Where's this business going to go? And, anything and everything can be part of those thoughts. But yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy. But fans can look forward to your performance and your appearance at the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra this weekend. Once again, I'm reiterating, it is on Saturday, May 20th at the Alex Theater in Glendale, California, and Sunday, May 21st at UCLA's Royce Hall in Westwood, California. So what are you looking forward to specifically for this show with your debut with LACO?
So I do many different types of performances. I have several different bands and projects going all at the time. So depending on what I've released, everything changes. But the through line through my career is that now and then I also step in and join orchestras to play. Now I've got one album of my own called Between Us that's for orchestra, but I have my father's repertoire as well. And he wrote 3 concerto for sitar and orchestra and 1 symphony. And this is concerto number 3, which is the first one that he wrote, not for himself as soloist originally. It was written for me to premiere. And so far, I've been the only performer of this piece of music. And it's a very, very sweet piece of music that he wrote in his late 80s. And it's not recorded yet. So actually hearing it live is like the only opportunity you can have to hear it. So it's a very beautiful piece of music of his. And I love getting to play it.
That's amazing. We look forward to attending and hearing and taking part of the in-person experience. So now where can people find you online on social media to stay connected with your upcoming album that you mentioned and your other performances?
Everything's a version of my name. So on Instagram, it's Anoushkha Shankar Official. You can find me as Anoushka Shankar on Facebook, or I think Shankar Anoushka on Twitter. And if you want anything to do with info about tickets and shows and tours, my website, anoushkashankar.com, has a link to all of them. And we do have a big tour coming up in October where we'll be returning to go all across North America. And so, I would love people to look that up and come and find us as well.
All right, Rukus Avenue radio listeners, you can also, in addition to finding Anoushkha Shankar online on social media and her website, you can also visit laco.org for more information about the specific tickets for this weekend and her performance at the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra. So as we start to wrap up, Anoushka, our long-flowing conversation that could probably take days to finish, we really go into it, but I know you're short on time. So as the acclaimed daughter of the late sitar player, Pandit Ravi Shankarji, and a musical talented sitar player, film composer, and a music artist herself, tell us about your journey in music.
I mean, hopefully there's still a long way to go, right?
Absolutely.
I was very, very blessed, as you say, to start learning with my father. I mean, there's no one, better to possibly learn my instrument, the sitar, from. So I had the opportunity to learn from him from very early on. And I started touring early. When I was 13, I was fully on the road by the time I was 14. Started making albums at 16. So I started very, very young, and I had a lot of quick opportunities come my way. But then I kind of had to take a pause in my 20s and sort of stop and think about what I really want to do and the kind of music I wanted to make. And I think, from that point, I've been really fortunate to be able to do that and have listeners. And, I don't take that for granted. It's a beautiful feeling.
Absolutely. And I feel like the journey is just begun. I feel like life always unravels itself in the most beautiful ways. And when we think as the stop point, it's actually a transition and it's a new chapter. So we look forward to catching you this weekend for your performance, as well as look for any upcoming events that you may have, like you mentioned, from your website and other musical releases. So it was a pleasure speaking today with you, Anoushka, and thank you so much for your time. And would you like to say any words for our listeners?
Oh, I just hope you come and join us at the show, and I hope you enjoy it. And thank you.
All right, Rukus Avenue radio listeners, this is your correspondent, Priyadarshini G. Roy, interviewing the world-renowned Anoushkha Shankar, signing off. Until next time.
Rukus Avenue Radio.